For nearly 2 decades, a chilling mystery has haunted the Jersey Shore. It's the unsolved case of a killer who left behind a string of victims and a really perplexing signature, earning him the name the Eastbound Strangler. All right, so let's set the scene. We're in Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, right in the shadow of Atlantic City's bright lights. It's late fall, November 2006, when a truly grim discovery is about to completely shatter the coastal calm. When you look at this whole case, all the leads, all the theories, all the frustrating dead ends, it all boils down to one stark, chilling number. 4. That's right, 4 women. Their lives cut short, their bodies found together in just the most harrowing circumstances imaginable. This single moment kicked off one of New Jersey's most frustrating and enduring manhunts. To really understand this mystery, we have to start with the crime scene itself, because the details here, well, they aren't just disturbing, they're deliberate. The precision of the scene was absolutely chilling. So it was November 20th behind the Golden Key Motel. And the bodies weren't just discarded, they were placed. Each woman was positioned face down in a drainage ditch, with her head pointing east. They were all fully clothed, but every single one of them had their shoes and socks taken off. This wasn't random. It was a ritual. It was a signature that screamed to investigators that they were hunting a serial killer. But before we get any deeper into the investigation, it's so important that we remember the women at the heart of this tragedy. They were more than victims in a case file. They were real people with lives, families, and their own stories. First, there was Kim Raffo. She was 35, a wife and mother, and police think she was the last to be killed. Then there was Barbara Burdor, 42 years old, who had vanished just a month before. Tracy Ann Roberts was only 23, and Molly Jean Diltz was just 20, and she's thought to be the first victim in the series. 4 women from totally different walks of life, all drawn into the orbit of Atlantic City, and all tragically connected by one killer. So you'd think, right? 4 victims and a really distinct MO. This case should have gained traction pretty quickly. But instead, investigators found themselves just hitting wall after wall, navigating a maze of frustrating dead ends. The first real person of interest was a man named Terry Olson. He was a repairman who was actually staying at the very motel where the bodies were found. And to make him look even more suspicious, his own girlfriend pointed the finger right at him during an argument. But, it was all circumstantial. The evidence just wasn't there. Forensics couldn't find any DNA to connect Olson to the crimes, so he was never officially named a suspect. For the task force, this was just the first of many, many dead ends. So next, investigators started looking at a man named Eldred Burchell. He went by this ominous nickname, Riverman, and he had reportedly confessed to another sex worker that he had killed people. I mean, that sounds like a pretty promising lead. And yet, nothing. The lead just dissolved under scrutiny. Investigators could never find any concrete evidence to connect Burchell to these murders, or any others for that matter, even with his alleged confession. So the trail went cold once again. The investigation just kept widening. The police questioned a man named Charles Coles, who was a friend of Kim Raffo. They also talked to Mark Hesse, who knew both Raffo and Barbara Burdor. But just like the others, both men were questioned and then ultimately released. The circle of potential suspects was actually getting smaller, but the killer, he was still a ghost. For a while, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, the answer was 100 miles away, connected to a completely different investigation that was gripping the whole nation. The Gilgo Beach serial killings on Long Island. The whole Gilgo Beach theory was a total roller coaster. In 2010, they looked into a link, but then ruled it out a year later. Then, in 2023, there's a huge arrest in the Gilgo case, and suddenly that theory comes roaring back to life. But just a few months later, prosecutors shut it down again for good, saying there was no known connection. It was the highest profile theory, and it ended up being the most definitive dead end. So, after all the persons of interest, all the different theories, and all these years, where does the case of the Eastbound Strangler even stand today? Officially, it's what's known as a cold case. Now, that means the active day-to-day investigation has pretty much stopped, but it is not closed. For the families of these 4 women, it remains painfully open, just waiting for that one piece of new evidence that could change everything. For years now, authorities have hoped that maybe a little financial incentive could break the silence. There's a significant reward being offered for information leading to an arrest, $25,000. And honestly, this might be the most haunting fact of all. For nearly 20 years, that reward money has just been sitting there, unclaimed. No one has come forward with that one crucial piece of information needed to identify the killer and finally get an arrest. And so, we're left with this question that just lingers over the Atlantic City Expressway. The identity of the Eastbound Strangler remains one of New Jersey's darkest secrets. And as technology advances and memories fade, the ultimate question isn't just who is he, but will these four women and their families ever get the justice they deserve?